Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, I used to work here, now solve your own problems. A little over a decade ago I worked for the local hardware outfit as the stores manager. I took the job because it was local, paid okay and was supposed to be relatively stress-free. Unfortunately, the reality of it was that the assistant manager, Colin, was a dickhead with an inferiority complex who had it in for me because I was more qualified than he was, although I had absolutely no interest in climbing the corporate ladder or taking his job. The job itself was overtasked and understaffed, and things were only getting busier as there was a building boom happening in the area at the time. As a result, I quickly ended up being run off my feet every day trying to keep up with the constant influx of goods and outgoing orders. To make matters worse, the overall manager, John, decided to reassign my two off-siders as delivery staff, leaving me on my own. When I protested, I was told to solve my own problems. I somehow kept up with the workload, but knowing this was not going to work in the long run, I continued in my attempts to get more staff in my area. Even just one off-sider would have made a huge difference. I tried reasoning with John, saying, what if I get sick or injured, how will you get the orders done then? His solution was that he would have some of the casual staff from the front retail area fill in if that happened. I laughed in his face and suggested that they could not find their own butts using both hands. Probably not the best way to handle things. Once again I was told to solve my own problems. Okay then, fine, I will do just that. The situation continued becoming more difficult each week. The incoming goods were increasing in volume to keep up with demand, think 2 semi-trailers per day, and as outgoing orders were to take priority, the incoming goods began piling up. Colin decided to rear his ugly head and make a fuss about stock not being checked in and stored on time. And in one of our more robust discussions, I seriously considered rearranging his face and told him so. He decided to go on an early lunch, run away, and hid from me in his office for the rest of the week. That was the day I realized I need to get out of this place. As for solving my problems, well, obviously I was looking for a new job. I answered an ad for correctional officers and attended a meeting for applicants, then sat the psych tests, interviews, and was finally accepted for the training to begin in 1 month. Perfect timing. The next Monday I walked into John's office and gave 2 weeks' notice. John was absolutely appalled that I would consider leaving such a good job. He tried offering me a raise of $1,000 per year. I laughed and said my starting pay was already $15,000 more than I was getting here and walked out. Now you would think a smart manager would immediately take steps to cover my position and begin training a replacement. Nope. Nothing happened for the next week and a half until on my last Thursday John finally showed up with a replacement, some entirely forgettable teenager who plainly had no chance of keeping up. I trained him as best I could and the next day said my goodbyes. 2 months later I walked in as a customer, flush with my new job money. The place was an utter mess. There was crap everywhere, unprocessed goods still in sealed boxes, pallets of sheeting just dumped in the truck yard, and no one could find anything. The original guy the first trained was nowhere to be seen, and 4 new young guys with haunted-looking faces were madly scrambling about trying to sort their crap out. No one knew where anything was, where anything goes, or even how to do a basic invoice check. Total disaster, which brought a warm glow to my evil black "told you so" heart. Upon seeing me, John quickly pulled me aside and asked if I can help out and show the new guys what to do. I took great pleasure in reminding him that I had repeatedly warned him this could happen, and then not only did I no longer work here but that he will have to, and I quote, solve your own problems. The next one is titled, You Don't Want Me to Change Prices, Fine. At one supermarket I worked at, only the store manager and the assistant store manager had access to the entire computer system. Department managers only had access to sections that were directly relevant to their departments. However, when I first started, and my access was set up, the store manager stuffed up and inadvertently gave me full access. It meant that when she wasn't around, I was able to fix certain little problems that would pop up. I was a fast learner, and was able to work out these issues pretty quickly. One time the area manager came in for a surprise visit after the store manager had left. There was an issue with some pricing on products, but no one had access to that part of the computer system except me. The problems were serious enough that the area manager wanted them fixed straight away, and was looking at calling the store manager to come back in to fix them. I piped up, said that I had access, and could fix the problem. Area manager wanted to know how I had access. I explained, mentioned the things I have been doing, and the area manager gave me the verbal authority to continue doing what I have been doing, fixing things up that the store manager doesn't know about. I fixed the pricing issue for the area manager, and afterwards he said to me to let him know every time I have to fix up an issue that the store manager had ignored. Things continue on for a couple of months. I continue doing what I am doing, continue giving the area manager reports on things I have been fixing up. Store manager has no clue, until one day she comes back into the store. She had finished and left about 30 minutes earlier because she had forgotten to send an email. She sees me at the computer, fixing pricing errors, and asks who gave me the authority to do that. I said nobody, I just thought it would be good if they got fixed sooner rather than later. She said she was going to give me a written warning, and if she ever sees me doing anything on the computer outside of my department needs, she will fire me. I said okay. If she did not want me fixing things like this anymore, then I will not. I let the area manager know, and he said to just go along with it for now. He also got a copy of the written warning. He also told me that if there were any serious issues, let him know, and he would get head office to fix them remotely. Another couple of months pass, and the area manager comes in one day for a chat with the store manager. He had a huge list of things that he needed to check off, issues that he claimed had been identified in other stores. These were all issues I could have quietly fixed, but did not because of the store manager's threat. Area manager went and checked each one, and the store manager had done nothing about any of them. Assistant store manager was called in, and asked whether he had done any of it. Assistant manager said that the store manager had control over that area. Area manager asked whether anyone else knows how to fix these errors, in case they are identified when the store manager or assistant manager are not around. Store manager says no. Area manager then asks why did this written warning come across his desk, and pulled out my written warning. The store manager said she had no idea that the area manager had that warning, then explained she was afraid that I had been stuffing things up in the computer system. Area manager called me into the office. Area manager asked the store manager a couple of questions about how to fix the errors. She gave her answer. Assistant manager was asked, he said he was not sure, and would probably ask the store manager. Area manager then asked me. I told him step by step what I would do. Area manager then rang another store manager, on speakerphone, and asked them. The other store manager agreed with my way of fixing the errors. Area manager then asked me to leave the room. For the next couple of minutes, the area manager spoke to both the store manager and assistant store manager. Assistant store manager comes out, finds me, and says things are going to change around here, but he said it in a nice way. After another 10 minutes, the store manager comes out, does not even look at me. Area manager comes out, lets me know I can go back to fixing errors when I see them, and leaves. 2 weeks later, I go on holidays for 3 weeks. I come back, and find out the store manager has suddenly been transferred to another store, a lesser store, without warning, and recommending me for the management development program. The next one is titled, Boss said I couldn't switch shifts to go to court sessions because of my contract. I complied. When I was in the last couple years of college, law school, not in USA, I got a part-time internship in the state attorney's office in my town. I had an immediate boss who was as close as possible to a friend. He always complimented my work and taught me a lot. But his superior, the attorney chief, it's hard to translate these job names, I'll just call him chief from now on, was another case. He was a methodical guy, who liked to boss people around just for the sake of being a pain in the butt. There were other interns my age, and even younger ones from high schools, part of a program from the government. The younger, high school interns would do activities such as printing, copying, and, the most annoying, accompanying the officer's clerk to the courthouse, in order to carry all the tax enforcement papers in a car. This will be important later. The attorneys often came in late or went out early for court appointments, so I would be left alone working in my room most of the afternoon, writing tax enforcement procedures. I had class at night and worked in the afternoon. Eventually, I had to switch my shift around so I could watch court sessions as a requirement to graduate. The court sessions were always in the afternoon. It would only take a few weeks of rearranging my shift whenever there was a court session. I would come into work on Monday morning, then Tuesday afternoon if there were no sessions on that day, and so on. That's when trouble started. I was a good intern. I helped my immediate boss out a lot, never got behind on deadlines. But there was no way that chief could ignore an intern coming in on Monday morning and then on Tuesday afternoon, no. Just one more thing you should know, around that time all the high school interns suddenly left, so I and 2 other law school interns would take turns accompanying the clerk to the courthouse, carrying the cart all around like a high school kid normally would. It wasn't pleasing, but we complied. Then one day, came chief into my room while my boss was out. "Op," he said, "this switching shifts around cannot go on. It's becoming messy. I need you to only come in on the afternoon, as your internship contract says." I tried explaining to him that I was almost done with the court sessions, that I had to be there in order to graduate law school, that there were no sessions in the morning, but he was relentless. Later that day, the clerk came knocking on my room. "Op, will you come with me to the courthouse?" She asked nicely, she was a good person. But it wasn't my turn to go. I told her that and she said the chief had discharged the new intern from going, so I had to go that day again. The mention of his name made my blood boil, and I immediately replied, "I will not go. Chief wants me to stand by my internship contract, and there is no accompanying the clerk to the courthouse under the activities section in my contract." She gulped nervously and said, "I agree with you, but he will not like this." My friend who worked in the next room was standing by the door and heard the whole thing. I remember the satisfaction I felt when she said, "You were so brave, but you're in trouble." But I had made up my mind, I would quit the internship, but I would rub this in his face. So I refused to go. When my immediate boss heard about what had happened, he told me to apologize to Chief. Chief couldn't just fire me because he knew I was right, so he tried to embarrass me into apologizing. I refused to do that and decided to quit my internship anyway. If I continued seeing that man's face every day, I would probably end up punching it. So I quit. Never talked to any of them again. I still shake with anger remembering this episode and Chief's condescending face, but I think answering like that was one of my brightest moments. The next one is titled, "Bill me hundreds of dollars for what I already know? Here's my weekly payment." Years ago on Memorial Day long weekend, I was enjoying a tasty frozen Snickers bar and broke a tooth. Being a holiday weekend, I knew the dentist office would be closed but thought maybe they had some sort of nurse line or something for advice. Imagine my surprise when I received an answer and was transferred to my usual dentist. After answering numerous questions, including whether or not the tooth had broken above or below the gum line, important for later, the dentist says he'd be happy to see me in the morning, Memorial Day itself. So I go in, his office is void of any humans besides himself, there were some fish to bear witness. He puts on one latex glove, takes a look in my mouth and says, "Oh, it's below the gum line, we discussed this, you're going to have to go to a maxillofacial surgeon. I've got a guy the first can refer you to, but he's not open until tomorrow." He refuses to do anything further in his office, not even a painkiller script, the bastard, and I leave. I get it fixed the next day and was relatively happy with the surgery. Imagine my surprise when a few weeks later I get a bill from the dentist for $700. I call the office and they explain that it was an emergency service on a holiday I was being billed for. After arguing with them that this never came up once on the phone or during the visit and all he did was put on one glove, look in my mouth and tell me he couldn't do anything, they wouldn't budge on the bill. Being the total vindictive witch that I am, I said fine, but I'm broke and I also had a surgery bill to pay, so I'd be paying it out with weekly $5 payments. They didn't necessarily like this and tried to get a higher monthly payment, but I wasn't budging either. So, I started sending them $5 a week along with a single latex glove, which they returned each with a note saying it wasn't a large enough payment. After a few months of this, the bill went to collections. Let me tell you folks, I kept every single returned check and explained to the collection agency that I'd been trying to send them money for months but they refused my payment. I sent them my proof with the returned checks and notes from the dentist. It was a beautiful moment when the agency informed me that I'd done my part by attempting payments. It disappeared off my credit report shortly afterward, and that's the last I ever heard of the matter. The next one is titled, "Not Letting Me Unload My Groceries." Fine, enjoy the most uncomfortable 3 minutes of your life. I was starting to unload groceries at a supermarket from my basket to the rubber belt leading to the cashier. Guy comes behind me so close that almost touching me and puts his 3 items on the belt. I stop and say excuse me, politely showing him with my hand that I am in the middle of something, cashier also giving the guy a look of what are you doing? The guy says, you have enough space to do your thing. Okay, fair enough, I will use all the space. I turn 180 directly to him, now our faces are almost nose-rubbing distance, and I start unloading my things with 10x slow motion, keeping my eyes fixed to his eyes directly, making myself as big as possible and moving towards him inch by inch. I'm a tall and big guy, he was not. He uncomfortably has to reach to the belt to avoid his things going to the cashier while the belt rubs and screeches against the bottom of his things. Which I have to give it to him, he held on to the end and did not take his stuff and back up. The face of agony when he tries to avoid my direct eye staring while I'm moving as slowly I possibly can and trying to hold on to his things for about 3 minutes was worth it. I had full basket of week's groceries. Cashier smiled and nodded to approve when I was paying. The next one is titled, Seating People is More Important Than Actually Serving People. Disclaimer, I am in no way saying that I am a model waitress. Just that I was trying to help out and make sure customers got good service. This took place years ago when I was in college, in my first and only waitress job. I worked at a Genghis Grill type restaurant, where people create their bowl and bring it to the chefs to cook the food. My job was to seat people, bring them their drinks and refills, give them the check, and clean tables. One weekend night, it was 2 other women and me. We were slammed. All tables were full, people were quickly downing their drinks, and the table turnover rate was high, which meant we had to bus tables and fill drinks constantly. I would run back and forth all over the place, refilling drinks and cleaning tables so that new people could be seated. I did this because I wanted to help out and make sure people were getting good and fast service, and also because we tip share. On the off chance that I made it back to the front where the register was, I would be taking people's payments and maybe seating one table. My manager, supervisor was upset. She claimed that she and the other girl were doing all the work. I tried to explain that I kept seeing empty cups, dirty tables, and a long wait list of people. She demanded me to ignore their tables, only take care of my tables, and to seat more people. Whenever I worked lunch shifts with her, she would always stand in the front, playing hanging with friends. She would barely check on her tables. Basically, she acted like she didn't give crap about the job. And in my first 2 weeks, when I was being trained, I only got 50% of the tips that I would normally get. The reason was that whoever was with me had to work harder to help me out. So I had already had to deal with 2 weeks of her lazy behavior, pulling more work than her, and only getting half my tips. I knew that I wasn't going to stay at this job for much longer since I was only working for the summer. So I did just that. I only took care of my tables, cleaned my tables, and checked out my tables. I constantly walked by table after table, impatiently waiting for refills or their check, or dirty and needed to be turned over. I mean, there were 10 to 20 tables that needed their waitress. But I ignored them. Screw my co-workers and their tip money. I complied with the demands of my boss. Eventually I caved, after having passed a family at least 7 times with empty drinks that were never refilled. I grabbed the pitchers and refilled their drinks, because they didn't deserve this bad of shitty service. While talking to them, they asked if I was their waitress. I denied it, apologized for their lackluster service, and offered to find out who it was. Lo and behold, it was witch boss. I walked over to her, now scrambling like crazy to serve and turn over her tables by herself, and informed her that one of her tables has been waiting for their check. When they were leaving, they left a pretty crappy tip. But then the grandma slipped me a $5. I remember watching my manager typing up the night's money totals in the company Excel sheet. We made a total amount that was pretty low compared to what we normally make on a weekend night, at least for me. I enjoyed the fact that she couldn't go clubbing with as much cash as she had intended. I kept up my compliance whenever I worked with her. And in the short few months that I worked there, I started having regulars who would wait for me to seat them. And more people started slipping me cash on the side, especially when there were other instances where she ignored tables and never refilled their drinks, so I didn't have to share those tips. Well, I'd turn in $1 or $2 for tip share, just to keep suspicion off me. And to make things sweeter, the owner notified us that he would be closing down the restaurant to remodel. Since I was leaving for college soon, it didn't hurt me. but which was out of a job for months with no pay while she tried to plan her redneck wedding. The next one is titled, "You Are Not Allowed to Drive That Car." For some context, I'm a 21-year-old female university student who's living on my parents' couch for the next 2 weeks before I move back into my school's town. They are currently redoing their pool, with employees working MF. I pay my own rent at a room near my university, so I signed up for a clinical trial to take off the added burden of paying for my expensive medicine while getting some grocery money at the same time. I had an appointment early this morning for the trial, and I told my mum about it last night. She immediately disapproved, stating that she didn't want me to be a guinea pig for money. So she woke up before me and took my car out so I couldn't drive it. The only other car in the driveway is her big truck, which I'm uncomfortable driving but will if I have to, so I called her and told her that because she took my car, I'll be driving her truck to the appointment instead. She of course flipped her lid and screamed at me about being a sellout. "Y'all, I'm just trying to get some grocery money here." My mum also made it clear that she has her own plans and won't be back with my car until later today. She then ended the call saying that I am, in no circumstances, allowed to drive her car. Fine. Whatever. I rescheduled my appointment and went back to the couch to try to sleep, when the pool workers showed up. They have a huge concrete truck that can only be used when the driveway is empty, but my mum's car is of course plopped in the middle of it. So they can't start working until my mum's truck is moved out of the driveway, and with no one else home this means that I'm the only one who can do it. Oh, except for the fact that I am in no circumstances allowed to drive her car. Whoops. The last one is titled, "That Won't Fix the Customer's Problem, but it will certainly fix mine." Back in the dawn of smartphones, I was doing consumer tech support for a wireless carrier. My scope was internet functions on your phone like web browsing, email, and some in-house apps. One of those apps was a third-party corporate syncing solution I'll call CorpTech. CorpTech had a bunch of features in addition to the standard email, contacts syncing, which boiled down to administration stuff like restricting web browse and text messaging, forcing a password for unlock, etc. All of this was almost exclusively supported by CorpTech themselves, and my senior reps had the only escalation path. So one day I had a guy who was an in-house administrator for a company and was having problems with CorpTech. As soon as he joined the device to the CorpTech system's web browsing would fail. My options were limited. Since I couldn't see his CorpTech server config, we focused on the device. We master reset the device and everything worked. This meant the device and wireless network were working. The problem is outside of my scope. Cool. I reached out for assistance from a senior rep, and unfortunately I got a guy who we'll call Dwayne because that was his name, and I still hate him 10+ years after leaving that job. Dwayne was in another part of the country in a call center that was frequently viewed as an incompetent set of morons. I had a section of my cubicle wall dedicated to receipts from the local bar labeled "Call Center B Inspired Drinking." Additionally, he was the sort of guy who was more interested in rules and regulations as opposed to his job. I suspect he was promoted so he wouldn't be talking to customers anymore, but I digress. I tell Dwayne we need to escalate to CorpTech's support team. He put the brakes on that and insisted on troubleshooting further. Fortunately, the caller was cool and we repeated the steps, all while keeping Dwayne updated in chat. Dwayne insisted that if CorpTech synced it meant the phone's internet connection was good. I agreed and suggested it was a CorpTech setting blocking web browse, hence my wanting to escalate to them. Dwayne insisted it wasn't that and has me tell the customer to master reset again. I ask what we should do if it doesn't work. He says it's a bad device and to exchange it. I'm a little taken aback. It can't be a bad device since it works perfectly outside of CorpTech's influence, but sure, I'll swap out the device. I talk to the caller and say I'm being instructed to exchange his phone, but he may want to look further into his CorpTech server settings. He understands. I save the chat transcript with Dwayne. I'm friendly with the senior reps in my building, so I print out the transcript and wander over on my break. I hand it to one of them and suggest they take a look at it. Her eyes got really wide as she skimmed it and she asked if she could give it to her boss, the head of all the senior reps. I smiled and said sure, I can print another copy. It turns out this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Dwayne was fired not long after. Thanks for listening.